Comparing fractions in the real world. So you might be wondering, why do I have to know how to compare fractions? When am I going to ever use it? Well, here are some real life examples of how you may have to use fractions in the real world. So you may need fractions to tell time. If you look at the clock here, it is showing 12:15. If you know the parts of the clock is divided into fractional parts that is equal to the hour. So if it's 15 minutes past 12 o'clock, instead of saying it's 15 minutes past 12, we can say it's a quarter past the hour because the clock has, again, it's divided into four parts. So from 12 to 3 is one fourth or a quarter. From 3 to the 6 is another um, quarter, but together that makes 30 minutes. And then from 6 to 9 is another quarter. And from 9 to 12 is another quarter. So we have like one fourth here, one fourth here is divided into four parts. And we'll get into that more when we talk about time, when we learn about time. But that is one way where you can use fractions or comparing fractions in the real world for time. You can also use it for cooking, for baking, because you need to be able to read fractions using measuring tools such as a measuring cup and measuring spoons. Also, you can use fractions when we are trying to share. So if I'm trying to determine how much of a pizza I am going to share with a friend, then I need to be able to understand how to divide the whole pizza up, and I need to be able to figure out what fraction I want to share with my friend and to make sure that, either I'm going to share equally, or if I don't want to share as much as with my friend, which would be a little bit selfish. But if I wanted a bigger piece of the pizza than I want to give my friend, she may not even want a big piece. I need to be able to figure that out, and I can use that by comparing fractions. You can also use comparing fractions when you're at the grocery store and they have discounts. Because sometimes those percentages, which you'll learn when you get into upper grades, can turn into fractions to help you decide like what is the price off an item, instead of using a percent. And of course, when you're counting money, we know that four quarters is equal to $1. And let's say that I wanted to, again, divide my dollar up, or share my dollar with my sister, but I only wanted my sister to have a fourth of my dollar, and I want to have three-fourths of the dollar. Well, that means that I would get three quarters of my three of the four quarters that I have, and my sister will only get one because one fourth of a dollar is one quarter. Three-fourths of a dollar will be three quarters because three quarters equals 75 cents. So if you were wondering how you would ever use fractions or compare fractions in the real world, here are a couple of examples or a couple of ways that comparing fractions will be applicable in the real world. So it's very important for you to know how to read fractions and compare fractions. Okay, so today our focus is comparing fractions, and we're comparing fractions using like denominators, which are the same denominators. And that means that our numerators are going to be different. So, what I want you to do at this time is to, in your journals, I want you to anchor this chart in your journal. Now, this is just showing you, giving you some information about how to compare fractions. Please make sure that you date it for today. And it's also telling you the ways that we are going to learn to compare fractions by using our less than symbol, greater than symbol, and equal symbol. And I have an example at the bottom where it says three-fourths is greater than one-fourth. And we're going to get into you being able to understand how to compare it using the same denominators. And that's exactly what it says. It says, are the denominators the same? It says yes. That's easy peasy. The fraction with the greater numerator is the bigger fraction. And so I've also drawn a model here to show you how 3/4 look. 3/4 of a model is shaded, and I've also drawn a model for 1/4 to show you how that looks. So just looking at the models that represents 3/4 and 1/4, you can see that the area that has the most shaded or the greater amount shaded would be 3/4. So therefore 3/4 is greater than 1/4. And even using what we know from comparing numbers, we know that 3 is greater than 1. And so when the denominators are the same, and this only happens when the denominators are the same, where we can compare the fractions using what we know about place value and comparing whole numbers to compare fractions with the same denominators, looking at the numerator. Remember that the denominator is the bottom number of a fraction that tells you the total parts, what the total parts of the whole are, and the numerator represents parts of the whole or parts of a set. So if I have 3/4, that means I have 4 total parts, and out of those 4 total parts, 3 are shaded. If I have 1/4, that means I have 4 total parts of the whole, and out of those total 4 parts, my numerator represents one of those 4 parts that's shaded. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a few minutes to anchor this anchor chart inside your math journal, and then we're gonna come back and continue our lesson on comparing fractions with like denominators. We can use a number line, we can use fraction models, we can use fraction circles, we can use any of those three things to help us to compare fractions. Remember, we are using our symbols less than, greater than, and equal to compare. But if we needed a visual to help us to compare fractions so we can see which fraction is the greater fraction, these visuals will help us to compare. So now we are going to do a little guided practice. And let's look at our first example. So our first example here, I have two fraction circles as well as a number line. So I am going to partition our number line into fourths. Okay, so it's easier for me to find my midpoint in the number line to help me to partition my number line equally. So between 0 and 1, my midpoint area would be along here. Okay, so that's halfway. So now I am going to um, make two more markers on my number line for my number, so my number line can have, try to have at least 4 equal parts. It's not always easy when you are using the mouse that's on the Chromebook, but we're gonna try to make the best of it. Okay, so okay, my line is kind of slanted. Okay, I want it to be straight as possible, so forgive me trying to perfect it. Okay, so now I have my number line partitioned into 4 parts. Again, here would represent 1/4 of my number line, 2/4, which That's halfway. Yeah, I needed to make it look smaller. The next marker would be 3/4. I wasn't trying to move it. And then we have one hole. Okay, now I'm going to partition my circles into fourths as well. I like how it's giving me my markers to help me to partition it evenly and have straight lines. That's awesome. Okay, now that I have my fraction circles partitioned into four equal parts, I am going to shade 1/4 of my model or circle to show 1/4 of the fraction. Uh-oh, and I want the whole thing to be shaded. Let me change it back. Now I've changed it a whole different color. Okay, yellow. So let me just use my pen here on my marker here to shade. Okay, is that doing what I needed?